Hi, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in today. Today will be the first in what I hope will be many more interviews. Today I'll be interviewing my good friend, Seth Trader. Seth's a great guy. He's a wonderful father to his kids, a loving husband to his wife, somebody that I've known for many years. Really appreciate him, really respect him for who he is. Seth is a registered nurse. He works as a registered nurse. On top of that, he is a former Army veteran, a veteran of Afghanistan war, where he served. In his his free time, he enjoys weightlifting, working out, working in his yard, spending time with his family. He probably eats nails for fun. He's a real tough guy, and he really exemplifies that.
It's true.
And and all around really wonderful guy. So I'm really looking forward to this interview. Seth, welcome to the show. Thanks a lot for being here.
It's good to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is my first podcast, actually, so it's kind of, we're going to see how it goes.
Well, if anything gets screwed up, then I guess we'll blame it on you.
All right, that's fine. We just chop it out.
There we go.
It'll be all right.
So
Parts of my life just missing.
There we go. That's all right. So before we start, Seth, I wanted to speak on behalf of myself, the viewers out there. When I express my gratitude for your service to our country, you, as well as many other men and women, sacrificed a lot to ensure our freedom, ensure the freedom of many others around the world. And it's because of your sacrifice and many others that we enjoy the freedoms that we do. I know that we thank you, especially because it has personal meaning to you, with friends that you lost while over there, and the memories of them that you carry on in many different ways. So thank you for that. I know I speak for myself and everybody watching as well.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, Seth, why don't you, from your own words, tell us about yourself? Maybe, you were born in, I think you were born in Delaware. I think you lived in Delaware your whole life. So tell us about life growing up.
Basically, I was born in Delaware. I actually started out south of the canal for the first 8 years of my life. Been in Delaware my whole life.
And for those listening at home, south of the canal, when we say that in Delaware, the canal splits what we might call North Delaware from Southern Delaware. Right. And really it's seen more as a cultural shift more than anything. So when we say south of the canal, that's the kind of thing we're talking about. It feels almost like a different way of life.
Yes, Lower Delaware is what they call it, and there's connotations to that. But I was from Lower Delaware. You'll see that here in a minute. But lived under the St. George's Bridge. There were lead chips that were falling off the bridge. They actually had to repaint it. I ate some lead chips when I was a kid, which might explain a couple things as we go through this interview here. But a little mercury too. But lived under St. George's Bridge, an old 1840 house. It was built in the 1840s, and I'm one of 5 kids. I have my mom and my dad. And growing up was, now that I look back in retrospect, you kind of sort of see things differently. It was a modest upbringing, middle class. I could see that at times my parents were struggling. My dad was working long hours. He worked at UPS, delivering boxes. My mom struggled with depression and tried to take care of all of us. And things you notice in retrospect kind of just changes the perspective, helps you see things better, and more understand yourself in the long run. So anyway, it moved up to Hockessin, Delaware, which is north of the bridge, and lived there until I was about 19. Ended up signing up for the Army at 19 years old. So
I know that you went to college for a little bit first and then entered into the Army. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, I went to the University of Delaware for a year and just kind of felt like I didn't have much direction, felt kind of lost, was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I ended up meeting my wife, Emily. Well, I didn't meet her there. I actually have known her since high school, but we ended up dating seriously when I was a freshman at University of Delaware. And then we decided that, we wanted to get married. So her father was like, well, you need to have a plan. You can't just get married. That was back in the day. And so I was like, you know what? I always wanted to serve my country. My dad was in the Army. My grandpa was in World War II.
Okay.
I had uncles in the Canadian Army. And I'm the only one from my generation that joined the Army. So something I always wanted to do. Also, it would provide a way of supporting my wife, Emily, and kind of starting our future, kind of jump-starting our future. And so that's what I did. 19-year-old brain, trying to make huge decisions. It's pretty incredible. It's pretty incredible. So it's like 18-year-old, you're legal. Oh, here you can sign your life away. But anyway.
Obviously, that was a big decision for you at the time. One that would obviously impact your whole life. A lot of things that I assume you carried with you and will carry with you through the rest of your life. Knowing you, and obviously mental health is an important thing for me and a focus of mine in my life. I know that that's something that you have. It's been a focus of yours, especially since serving as well. What at that age? I know you said you wanted to serve your country. Obviously, you had family. There was the family ties there with military service. But when you were considering joining the Army at that point, what was going through your mind in terms of what that might actually look like?
Well, yeah, I kind of alluded to it. You're 18, 19 years old. You kind of feel like you're without direction. And essentially, you're like a little bird getting kicked out of the nest. You don't really know. You're going to have to sink or swim, sort of.
Right.
You're trying to find your place in the world. You want to be something more than yourself. Mm-hmm. You want to contribute to our country, the way, our world in some way, shape, or form. So making that decision, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but then there's also a lot of factors that you don't even think about. Yeah. You don't think of the repercussions. You don't think really, about your identity or where you are then and there, and what potentially your identity could be later on in life. So, but the thing that the Army really taught me was a sense of discipline, a sense of direction. And was it my direction? No, it wasn't. It was for the purpose of serving the Army and serving our country. So you kind of have to put all those factors together to realize, what it is that you actually are trying to accomplish. But at an 18, 19-year-old brain, it's really hard to do that. It's really hard to do that. But I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to go in the Army, like I was saying, family history, being in the Army, I grew up watching all the movies, and I just loved the sense of honor about it. And I wanted to be something bigger. I was a combat engineer, we'll get into it. A 12 Bravo was the MOS combat engineer, and essentially what they do is blow things up. That's kind of the, and I always enjoyed that. It's going to be weird talking about that here, ever since 9/11, you can't talk about blowing things up, but that's what my job was. I get kicked off of a plane, I'll be put on the no-fly list here, but I was a kid. It was the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. And my dad was a Civil War reenactor.
Okay.
And he had black powder laying around. So, tennis ball, black powder, bottle rocket wick, got a tennis ball bomb, blow a tree up. So
get all the pieces there. I mean,
that's a 19-year-old brain, So yeah. I'm like, I like blowing things up. I know that. I've always wanted to go in the Army, serve my country. I know that. I want to get married. I want to be able to support my wife. Mm-hmm. I have no real direction right now. I'm kind of feel like I'm just floating around aimlessly, just kind of wandering. Yeah. And so I ended up picking a 12 Bravo, which is combat engineer. One of the big jobs they do is demolition, but they also clear the way, of IEDs. Right. Unexploded ordnance, so that the infantry can go out and essentially kill people. Right. And that's exactly what I did when I was overseas.
So you were in a vehicle, I guess, kind of led the way and watched and sought after those kind of things, or looked for them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so the first 3 months of my deployment, we were in eastern Afghanistan. Bob Salerno, and we went and traveled through the Coast Guard as Pass, which is honestly kind of reminds me of the Korean War a little bit. And ended up in Ghazni. And on Ghazni, there's literally one highway, Highway 1. And between Kandahar in the south and Bagram up north, Kabul, Bagram, we ran missions there and then on roads off of that. And there's just, there's so many unexploded ordnance from when the Russians were there. There's IEDs that obviously the Afghan people or the Taliban were constructing and in order to kill us, because they can't really take us man to man because we're America. We're driving around these huge MRAPs, these resistant ambush protected vehicles, which with a V-shaped hull at the bottom. So if you do go over an IED, the hope is that it explodes and then kind of pushes the explosion out to the side. Right. We'd roll out with mine rollers on the front of our vehicles, and it's like a game of Minesweeper. It's kind of like also kind of a game of cat and mouse. If you, as an American, like as your army develops another way to, I guess, get IEDs, the enemy is finding a smarter way to, like for example, if there's an IED, you have your mine rollers in the front of the vehicle. You can just offset the pressure plate. So you can hit the pressure plate, but then the explosion itself is under
is somewhere else.
So, and that's how a lot of our guys got killed. Unfortunately, it's and then there's another thing is like we used to use like these minesweepers. These we call them Huskies, and there's ways around. They have essentially have radar detection, and there's ways around that, and so it's kind of like a back and forth game, kind of.
So this is, let me go back to two things here.
Yeah.
Your reason for getting into the army, into the military, seemed, 19-year-old, 19-year-olds in general have trouble seeing the effect of their actions, seeing the future, and they're just very short-sighted, right? We all were, and every 19-year-old usually is. So, but it also seemed like it was a very selfless thing for you. Like, I want to serve my country. I want to do something that's going to benefit me, my country, eventually the woman that be your wife, your family ultimately.
Yeah, jump-started my life for sure.
Yeah. So it seemed like a selfless thing. And obviously something you really didn't know necessarily what you were going to get into either. But then everything you just described, of course, is extremely heavy.
Oh,
like, that's stuff that, and you know this better than I do.
That's the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, that the majority of people, maybe in the world, but especially in America, will never experience anything like that. Yeah, anything like what you experience, especially what you just described. You're on the front of the front lines, where we go out
before infantry goes out half the time.
You're the one. Your team, and I don't know if team's the right word. But
we were driving as a platoon.
Platoon, that's a better word, yeah. Right. So you and your platoon are the ones that are in harm's way with the unknown harm. Yeah, the stuff that's buried intentionally to try to kill people before they can even see it. I mean, I can't think of something that's heavier than that. You're going out every day with the most uncertainty, I would think. And so that's incredible. I know that I'm going to assume here that probably weighs on you and weighed on you certainly at the time when you were doing it. But when you're out there with your platoon in a truck, in a vehicle, and you guys know what you're up against. What's morale like? What's the atmosphere in that vehicle, knowing what you're driving into?
You really have to distract yourself.
Yeah. Okay.
You can't get stuck. You have a job. You have an objective. You have a mission. You can't get lost.
So you're objective driven. I'm here to do this, and
exactly.
I'm not thinking too much about it.
Yeah, but you can get stuck there. You can get stuck. You can be out on mission. Your mind can take you places, and then you can start feeling things. But you have to stay mission focused. And we distracted ourselves in so many ridiculous ways.
I bet.
I mean, we used to listen to Miley Cyrus through our headsets, you know?
And it would just be broadcast between all of you? Is that what it is?
Well, in the truck. Yeah. You could take one of the headsets that wasn't being used. You could strap one of the little nanos. This is before all the technology now. Right. And we would put one of the little headphones against one of the mouthpieces of the headsets, and we would listen to like Miley Cyrus. And it's just, you talk about it and you're like, the person back home's like, really? That's what they were doing? Listening to Miley Cyrus out on mission?
I imagine that, at that point, like you said, you have a job to do.
Yeah.
And you have to do it. There's no option.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't want to do this today. That's it.
Yeah.
And so I imagine that no matter how silly it may seem, anything you guys could do to entertain yourselves,
right.
Talk to each other, communicate with each other, just anything other than the difficult task ahead of you, other than thinking about that is.
Right.
That's, I can't even fathom, and I'm sure you get this a lot, but I can't even fathom what that's like, Seth. For you and all your guys, all of your platoon to experience that, and as well as all the other experiences that other military service members have experienced, that's unfathomable. And so that makes me appreciate you personally, as well as everyone else that has served that much more. Because I know that stuff happens. You've told me about this stuff, but I don't think about it. Obviously, I wasn't there.
Right.
And so it's, I mean, I respected you already, and I still do, and that much more so.
I'm glad you still do. I've given you plenty of reasons not to. Now just for a moment, you distract yourself. So you go out on mission, and then you come home after, deployment, I'm fast forwarding, and you find ways to distract yourself.
Sure.
And then that's why, I'm a nurse working in the ICU, but that's why 70 years later or 60 years later, I have Vietnam vets come up on my floor, full-blown PTSD. Yeah. And it's because for so long they use these coping mechanisms to distract themselves from what's really going on. They haven't really truly processed those experiences. Yeah. So it's funny. It's you think, you kind of have to keep your head on straight. You got to be in the right headspace. You got to go out there, do your job. And I mean, you can only distract yourself for so long. Eventually you have to address the problem head on. Right. And that's what counseling was for me in a way. Yeah. So I don't want to,
Well, so I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the kind of things that you did during deployment to keep your head on straight are the kind of things that don't work in civilian life. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that is the big issue, is trying to come back into civilian life afterwards. Right. That's the big issue. And it is a huge adjustment because you have a certain mindset that is drilled into you. Right. And you come back to the civilian world, you don't have your tribe, you don't have your pack. We're pack animals. We need our tribe, we need our brothers, and you're kind of, it felt like I was hung out to dry when I came back. Or at least I didn't have the tools I needed to work through that.
Sure.
And it's been over 10 years now since my deployment. And I feel like I'm still working on things. I'm still dealing with things. Right. But that's the big thing, is that transition back into civilian life.
Yeah, I imagine if you had talked about this stuff 10 years ago, I imagine we might be having a very different conversation.
Oh yeah.
At that point you were still,
I was a mess.
you were, like you said, you were trying to transition from that mindset with that group of people that you had grown so close to, that you had experienced horrible things with at times. I can only imagine what it's like to transition from that kind of, I have to deal with this, to I'm in a house. There's no danger around me.
Yeah.
And there's, I'm trying to move on with my life.
You're in that fight or flight response constantly. And you and I have talked about on-site like a lot of times. And
so on-site, I'll just interrupt you for a second. And you, I don't know much about this, but on-site is a program that I think they deal with more than military personnel or former military personnel. Yeah. But the aspect of it that you're referencing has to do with former military personnel that are back in civilian life and dealing with the kind of things and it's in Tennessee. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's outside of Nashville. Okay. The program I went to is called the Living Centered Program. And I mean, let me back up for a second and explain how I got to going to on-site.
Yeah.
Because it's a huge part of my life, right. And it really was a turning point for me. It was a breakthrough for me. And it's kind of a long story. I mean, I can ramble here for a while, but you're here to guide me. So
I gotcha.
Because it took a long time. You got to get sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yeah, right.
It took a long time to get there. Because if you think, I was talking about distractions. So when I got out of the Army, even before I got out of the Army, I was realizing when I got back, from Afghanistan, Emily, my wife, was like, you gotta go get some help. Yeah,
And you and Emily, were you guys married when you got back from?
Yes. Yes, we were married before. We got married on June 6th, D-Day. No, different type of D-Day, it wasn't 19something. It was 1944 now. 2009. Okay. We got married on D-Day in 2009. And
so then when was your deployment?
My deployment was April 2010.
Okay. So you guys were
when we
married
left
for less than a year.
Oh, yeah.
When you were deployed.
Yeah.
And then how long was your deployment?
It was a year.
Okay. So married for, I think it was 9 months, 10 months.
Roughly, yeah.
If I'm doing my math right. So then April 2010, left for Afghanistan, gone for a year. You come back April 2011?
Roughly, yeah.
Roughly April 2011.
The thing is
spring 2011 or so.
We get married in June, and it's like, okay, well, now you have a deployment hanging over your head barely for the first year of your marriage.
Right.
There's so much stress involved with that because there's training, there's uncertainty.
Sure.
You're kind of getting carted around like a bunch of cattle. Seems like, hey, go here, go to the range, go do this, go to the demo range, go work on that.
So not only
getting prepped for the deployment.
So not only are you trying to figure out your first year of marriage as an 18, 19-year-old, but you're also that lingering, I'm going to be deployed. Did you know?
I just turned 21 when I got married.
Okay.
Yeah, so June 4th was my birthday, yeah.
So 21-year-old, young nonetheless, trying to deal with that first year of marriage. And did you know when you were going to be deployed when you guys got married? Or if, for that matter?
It was an emotional roller coaster. At first they're like, oh, you're going to Mosul, Iraq. And then they're like, no, you're not going to Mosul, Iraq. You're going to Afghanistan. Oh, we're not being deployed. No, you're going here. No, yes, we are. Mm-hmm. And you're like, it's just highs and lows, just a roller coaster because you're like, this is my life. And like, it's a lot to, the unknown is a terrifying thing. Yeah. So eventually they were like, yep, we're going to Afghanistan. So we went to Afghanistan. And, obviously the deployment, a lot happened there, but when I came back, which is kind of what I was getting at earlier, is when I came back, Emily was like, you need to get help. Yeah. There's sleep issues. Sure. There was a lot of daydreaming, seeing things, seeing people that had been killed, like in crowd, seeing people. Wow. And
it must have been scary.
Oh, it was terrifying. I remember we got back in April. I believe it was April. And it was snowing in Fort Drum. And we landed. And it's like, I just want to see my wife. Yeah. I just want to see her.
So is this, you guys get back and you get off the plane and I assume you're on a plane coming back. You get off the plane, and is there family members just standing there waiting for everybody to come? Is that the kind of setting?
Yeah, so you basically you're in like a little holding pattern, and there's a ceremony, and it's at the ceremony where I saw Emily for like the first time in a while. I mean, you have R&R on the deployment,
Sure.
But that was a difficult time too because one of my friends was killed while I was away, and so
When you say R&R, you mean that you were able to come back to the States
for like 2 weeks.
Okay. How often did that happen?
That was once for the
Okay.
whole deployment.
So the whole time, the whole year you were there, you were able to come back for 2 weeks. Of course, you had another horrible experience. Friend got killed while you were back in the States.
Yeah.
Came back to that. Yeah. Wow.
I mean, you feel helpless when that happens. You want to be there. You want to be able to help, but you can't.
Yeah.
So,
Well, at the same time, I imagine that you're torn. You've got your wife, your family, friends at home back in the States, but you've also got this team that I imagine that that your platoon, or the team, the people that you had when deployed, I imagine that maybe friendship doesn't really describe it too well, simply because of the bond, the way you guys had to look out for each other, is my guess. You know, when I describe a friend, I think of someone that I can laugh with, I can joke with, whatever.
but would you? I mean, the difference is I lay down my life for one of them,
Right.
and they would lay down their life for me.
That's what I mean. Like
no greater love, you know.
You guys had each other's backs, literally, life or death situations, and so that's what I'm saying. I mean, they're friends of yours.
Yeah.
But I don't know that even begins to describe.
Well,
it.
it's. I mean, the best way I can describe it is, you know, we were out on mission and we go through, and we're getting shot at. Our convoy's getting shot at. You know, we have to be concerned about rocket-propelled grenades and mortars and things like that. And we all depend and rely on each other.
Right.
You know, the guy who's dismounted in the vehicle or in the back, he's handing up rounds to the gunner, so the gunner can fire back. The driver's driving, so they can, you know, continue mission through the firefight. So we're all depending on each other,
Right.
like 100%. That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so a lot of, I mean, I can only imagine the kind of difficult things that you experienced, all of you experienced over there. And so, you had said that we had talked about this last week, or we had talked about it before, and you had talked about different, you know, you were taking pictures of it. There was a photographer there, but at some point it kind of became, things switched. You said that you just stopped taking pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Almost like, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, almost like you didn't necessarily want to remember what
Absolutely.
that looked like.
There's almost like a honeymoon stage of being deployed where you're sort of like, holy smokes, this is a new country I've never been to. I'm in the middle of nowhere with the United States Army looking for IEDs.
Yeah.
Like, how did I even end up here, number one? But there's a novelty. There's a, you're interested in the people, their way of life.
Okay.
You know, like how they live, where they live, the things you see. And then eventually, like, we had three guys from my platoon die, and I'm just like, I'm not interested in this country anymore.
Okay.
You know, I'm not interested in really like learning about them or trying to understand them anymore.
Okay. Yeah. So I can understand then maybe what you mean by the honeymoon period. There's a curiosity.
Absolutely.
Perhaps.
Curiosity. It's mysterious. It's a mysterious place. And, you know, like I tell a lot of my friends, it's like, you're painted a view of the world when you're growing up. It's your worldview, right?
Sure. Yeah.
From like 0 to 18. And you're told that the world is one way.
Right.
And then you go see the world and you find out that it's not that way at all.
Sure.
So you feel like your whole world is essentially turned upside down.
You don't even know what's true anymore.
Yeah. So that's where a lot of doubt came from. And it's, you essentially, you lose, it feels like there's no gravity. You're just floating in outer space. Kind of, you lose that sense of being grounded and having meaning. So that's what calls everything into question.
Yeah.
So I stopped taking photos. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm not interested. I don't really, like you said, want to remember.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have a whole album that I look through occasionally, and I'll show some people sometimes.
Sure.
But people can. There's a tendency of somebody when, like, an old friend of mine, I showed him the pictures, and it was like I was showing him National Geographic.
Oh, okay.
And it's such an intense and emotional, extreme period of my life that it felt cheapened by showing people
Sure.
these photos that I took.
Because from that person's perspective, like you said,
Purely innocent.
it's like, oh, I've never been to this place before.
Yeah.
That sounds
It's
interesting.
not a vacation.
Yeah, right.
I
But
didn't
of course, from your perspective, that's total opposite.
Yeah, like he experienced the same like curiosity, and I'm like that. I know it was 100% like innocent on his part, but my thing is, it's like it felt cheap, and I was like, yeah, you don't have a clue. I got pretty defensive, and I still, for a long period there, I would get really defensive.
I can understand why. I mean, nobody's going to understand that unless they were there.
No.
I would guess anyway.
So, I mean, before coming on here to this podcast, I haven't really talked about a lot of this for a while.
I imagine, yeah.
And the thing is it's not easy talking about it. I'm going to be dreaming about it. I'm going to be thinking about it for a couple weeks, like pretty much every day.
Well, I appreciate you talking about it, Seth.
Well, it's important. And the reason I'm doing is to keep the legacy of my friends alive, you know? And it's not about me anymore. It's about them, you know?
So you mentioned friends before, and I know that that's something that you have, the legacy of your friends, memories of them, is something that you've been able to carry on in some real personal ways. In addition to that, so we'll get to that in just a moment. I just want to ask during that period when the reality kind of hit you, when you were overseas, prior to that, you talked about kind of the curiosity, kind of the wonder of it, like, wow, I'm in a different place. After the reality hit you, you weren't really sure which way was up, all of that. You weren't really interested in the country for the sake of the country anymore. What was motivation like for you? I mean, what was it like getting up every day, knowing you still had to do that, and it wasn't up to you necessarily when you went home or anything like that? What changed? What felt? What was different for you in terms of just everyday things?
I mean, you got to put your boots on and Charlie Mike, as they say, which is CM, which continue mission, you know?
Gotcha.
You don't have the luxury of sitting around pouting. You have a brief moment to try to process. You can't really mourn.
Yeah.
And the new goal, well, it's always been the goal, but the priority is to watch out for your brothers and get everybody home, you know?
So are you saying that became that much more meaningful to you? We lost some people, and this is like, that's goal number one for me now, getting everyone home.
Well, so it was an interesting time when we were over there, and, you know, the cliche is hearts and minds, right? And winning hearts and minds of the Afghanistan people, you know, people of Afghanistan.
Right.
And at that point, it's like, it does change. The care and concern that you have for the people, it's still there, but you're even more so wanting to get the bad guys. And it's a difficult place to be because there are good people in Afghanistan.
Sure.
And I worked with incredible people there, between some of our interpreters and some of the locals.
Sure.
There's incredible people in Afghanistan. And, you know, it's a shame kind of how it all turned out. But that's not to say that our sacrifices was in vain.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
So
I imagine the effect of what you and your platoon did, as well as everyone that served over there in Iraq, you know, in the Middle East in general. I imagine that it's the kind of thing that might have an effect for many generations to come. As new leaders rise up, that hopefully that for lack of better terms, good wins out over the evil. I imagine it's difficult to see the fruits of those effort in short term, maybe in short term thinking or something. But I can't think of a situation where your efforts were in vain. And I'm not just saying that because I want you to feel good, but, you know, you guys were part of and correct me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm speaking out of turn here, but you guys were in a conflict that I guess wasn't necessarily popular with a lot of people, just in terms of, you know, why are we over there? Why? So I could imagine that it feels, I could imagine that kind of weighs on you at times.
So what I tell myself is we were there not just for, the job I was performing was not just to keep Americans safe. Mm-hmm. It's also keep the people of Afghanistan safe. Right. And we'd go out on missions, and a family getting in a cart being pulled by a donkey would go over an IED and get blown up like 50 feet in the air. So it's not just us getting killed, you know?
Sure.
So I think how many lives have been saved because of the work that my platoon did?
Yeah.
I don't know.
You never know, of course.
I don't know.
Assume that it was a lot.
But if it was one, if it was two.
That kind of I'll go back to the theme of selflessness here. You said that at some point during there, the reality of things hit you, and you're like, I don't have the curiosity anymore of this country. I don't have the curiosity anymore of, I'm in a different place and this feels cool, for lack of a better word. Despite having that, despite the reality of people in your platoon, friends of yours, getting killed, to still come at it with, we saved the lives of people that we've never met, will never know, may not even be thankful for you being there, but nonetheless, you saved their lives. You took an extreme sacrifice. You sacrificed a lot just to be there and to still maintain that attitude of we helped people that we will never know is incredible.
When you say sacrificed a lot, there's past tense there. I like to emphasize that it's ongoing sacrifice.
That's good. Yeah, good question.
Sacrificing.
Yeah.
Because, like my wife once said, I asked her, I'm like, did I ever come home? And she said no. And I'm not sure you ever will. And that's emphasizing that there is a process, an ongoing process of sacrifice.
I appreciate you making that correction.
Yeah.
Not only you sacrificed a lot, you sacrifice.
Yeah.
I like that.
Because you essentially give up your freedom and yourself and your vain causes, whatever they may be, to serve your country. You give up your life, you know? And I joked earlier saying, sign your life away.
Yeah.
You do. You give up your life. And if it gets to the point, you might have to die for your country. So that's the way I've been looking at it.
Yeah. Well, the cause of that obviously is a very honorable one. One that many people, of course, don't go into a role like that. Don't sign up for the military or anything, but enjoy the freedom that you sacrifice a lot for you and many other men and women. So all the more appreciation.
Our country's worth it, man, and we have the greatest country. And a lot of people will find ways to pick it apart, but we have the greatest country on this planet. It's worth defending. You know, and freedom's not free, and I mean, it's the nature of the business. You know,
and of course, you can say that with more authority than most of us.
Yeah,
you've seen, let's say, the other side of it. You've been in and experienced a country where they don't enjoy necessarily those kind of freedoms.
Living in terror every day and fear, and you know, essentially your fate is up to an ideology or somebody else, and that's why it's such a difficult war to fight. You know, they don't necessarily want the things that we as Americans want. Maybe they do. Maybe they want to live in freedom.
Sure.
But maybe they don't have the same. Well, they definitely don't have the same worldview as we do. Like Western, I guess, way of life is much different than way of life in the Middle East.
Sure.
I mean, it was like Bible times. Dirt houses, and like I was saying, donkeys, carts. But then there's the enemy, and they, they wanted to take our freedom away on September the 11th.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a difficult place to really. I don't know. I don't know.
That perspective is for me, it's a good reminder, because that's nothing that I really think about a lot. Specifically because I haven't had those experiences like you have. So when I think about stuff like this, I think that my perspective on things like that, on that freedom that you just talked about, on the freedoms that we have that not everyone else in the world does, certainly that's stuff that I take for granted. I know that many others do as well. And so I appreciate you bringing that up specifically, because it's not something that I consider enough. Not something that I think about and appreciate enough. So I appreciate you bringing that up. So you had mentioned, so you're fighting this war, and you're fighting it not only for the Afghan people at that time, but also for Americans. Now I know that you had friends, people that were close to you, that died in combat or while you were over there. I know that you do a lot to continue on their memory, to make sure that their sacrifice was not in vain. Can you tell us some of what that looks like for you?
Absolutely. I mean, living out every day the best I possibly can, continuing their legacy. Something as simple as my youngest, his middle name is King, after my buddy Jared King.
Well, you mentioned, I think you mentioned three friends specifically. Would you mind saying the names? So Jared King, one of them.
Ben Moore and Omar Seves. We also lost a buddy of mine, Blake Whipple.
Okay.
And we lost some friends after we got back too.
Okay.
One found out he had cancer.
Okay.
And another, when we've had several suicides.
Sure. We know that that's a huge problem in general, in the general population, but I don't know the exact number, but the amount of...
It's like 21 or 22 a day.
21, yeah. So the amount of suicides from veterans, from former military is horrible and unacceptable, really. So that kind of speaks to the ongoing sacrifice that you continue to deal with things even when you're not physically in harm's way.
Right. It's you are fighting a mental battle still, and it's exhausting. I've struggled with it. I've struggled with it for years, and you have to really dig deep down inside of you to keep going. You have to surround yourself with people that matter and that people that care for you. Yeah. And I've had some tremendous people in my life, and you have to do the work. You got to do the work. Mm-hmm. You got to work through it. And the reason I'm still here is because of the legacy of my friends. I want to keep it going, and I can't do them a disservice by offing myself. Yeah. And like I said, it's not about me anymore. And, when I was younger, it was. It's about them. It's about my family. It's about people that, God has put under me to care for. Yeah. So it's a real thing. I got in a pinch, and I'll just open up, tell you a little story.
Sure.
I've always struggled with wanting a way out. People say suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Sure.
Right. And it is honestly like living in a hell every day, a mental hell of sorts. And I got in a pinch one time where I just couldn't control myself. and your mind takes you places, deep dark places, and it's like demonic in a way. And it's like this voice inside you, it's just saying, you don't have anything to live for, man. Just give up. Just give up. And my buddy John Groth, who you should have him on here sometime, man. He's an incredible guy. He worked at the receiving end in Dover for a lot of the bodies that came home.
Okay. Wow.
And he was a chaplain and a great guy. He encouraged me to go get help. I got help. And, during that time, I was doing a lot of counseling, individual counseling. You get to this point, though, you're like, how can I be a father? How can I be a husband? How can I be an employee and go in weekly and have these wounds dug open, not sleep, and expect to be to function? How can I do that?
Sure.
And I've done a lot. I've done counseling since several months after I got back up till now.
And when you say those wounds dug deep, you mean open up about these experiences?
Yeah. Oh, I would. Yeah. One of the things I've been struggling with for a long time is a sense of survivor guilt.
Sure.
And it's important to talk about this because it's me accepting it.
Yeah. Right.
Like I was saying, the guys walk around with the Vietnam hats on. That's their way of accepting it.
Yeah.
Or me with my little license plate that says OEF 48. Don't track me down, cops. But Operation Enduring Free is a way of accepting your experience. There's a lot of denial, and just as a nurse, you got, as they say, denial is not just a river in Egypt, right? moment of comical relief. Anyway, I totally lost my train of thought. What was I talking about?
Well,
accepting.
Yeah, working on yourself, all of that.
Absolutely. Acceptance is the hardest stage, but it takes a lot to get there. And that's when I discovered On-Site, which was a week-long period. It was the Living Centered program. And it was incredible because they have an amount of money that people support them, donate,
Sure.
And it allows for people in the military who've struggled in various ways is to come out there and get a better understanding of their anatomy and kind of really what's going on in their body, their mind, and to address it there. And it was a process getting to that point.
Yeah. When you say acceptance, I know you said survivor's guilt, and when you say acceptance,
I was going to tell you.
What would you say
that
you're like? What's part of that acceptance for you?
I have to be careful, and I want to be sensitive, because Ben Moore, Omar Seves, Jared King, Blake Whipple, Mike Vukovic, all my buddies, Andrew Piles, they had a purpose. And their purpose is, in that moment, was to give their life for their country and for those around them. And I realized that I have a purpose, and that's acceptance. Accepting your experience as part of who you are, the fabric of yourself. And that survivor's guilt is kind of puts all that into question. Like, it should have been me, it should have been me that day. I was where my three buddies were killed. That was a vehicle I had driven in up to that point. And then at the last minute, my lieutenant pulled me out and said, I want you to be in this other vehicle. Wow. And so that was really hard to accept that whole thing, because I was like, I was ready. I felt ready to go. I felt ready to go. And then they went, So accepting those experiences as part of who I am,
Yeah.
keeping my friend's legacy alive, continuing to share about them, continuing to talk about them, and letting as many people I know about them and their story.
Yeah.
That's what acceptance looks like. So to stop fighting it, stop being in denial, to stop with the guilt, because it's not doing them or me any justice.
Yeah.
So it almost feels like a death of sorts.
Sure.
In a different way.
Sure.
Like an emotional, spiritual death in a way. And then obviously there's the rebirth, and I think the rebirth is the acceptance.
Guilt is such a complicated thing. It's not like we can control feeling it. But the idea of, I don't know how you would say this, but the way I would say it is, you don't have a choice if you feel the guilt. But perhaps what you do with that, or what you do after you feel the guilt, or as you're feeling the guilt, I think that acceptance piece you're talking about, it's there's nothing easy about it from my perspective. Now, from your perspective, there's super nothing easy about that, I would imagine. And I can't imagine that, I mean, you said how long it took for you to get to that point of...
And you have to be ready. You have to be in that headspace. Yeah. Nobody could force me to do it. Nobody could say, so many people wanted so much more from me in those difficult periods. But guilt, I had to recognize that guilt in a way almost felt to me like I was being selfish. I was making it about me, and it's not about me. It's about them. But like you said, it took a lot to get to that point, to start to rebuild and recreate.
For a lot of people that I talk to, the guilt almost feels like something they can do. Like why would I want to stop feeling guilty? Because feeling guilty makes me feel like I'm making up for it, or I'm doing like something to help.
Like a penance of sorts.
A penance, yeah, that's a good way to put it. But the reality of the situation is that it, like you said, doesn't help you, doesn't help their memory, doesn't help their legacy at all. And that's a difficult pill to swallow. And getting to the point of, this is selfish, or this feels selfish, or that whatever it means for the individual is... I can't imagine that was a relief either. Like getting to that point, like, oh, this is selfish, or however you were working through it.
It's all about how you view it, Jeff, because feeling guilt is almost like allowing the enemy to live in your brain rent-free. And you're like, you know what? I'm not going to let you win, because there's still war going on when you come back. There's still battles that are being fought. And finding that perspective, kind of seeing life through a different lens, is pivotal and essential. And it takes a lot of work to get there, and it takes continuous work getting there,
So your son, he just turned a year old not too long ago.
Yeah.
Little named King.
Yeah.
I'm sure that makes you feel good to some extent. Just knowing that his legacy lives on with your son, among many other ways. And even being able to talk about this and know that you've done a lot of work for yourself to get to this point of being able to talk about it, to being able to function in daily life and do your best. That all feels like really monumental things based on what you described, like where you were at mentally and physically and emotionally before. It sounds like a lot of progress, frankly, but it also sounds like, just like you said, a lot of work, a lot of, I was here and now I'm here. And that's a huge difference, it seems. You talked about counseling, you talked about your family, you talked about friends. What was it like having to rely on other people? And I shouldn't say rely on other people, but what was it like having to, I guess, reach out to other people or have people be a resource to you during those most difficult times or during that difficult period of your life?
Well, I think back to those times, and I think that like so many people wanted to help me, but I almost wasn't ready for their help.
Sure.
And I was hurting. I was lost. And when I got out of the Army, like, because I did some good counseling up at Fort Drum, their outpatient behavioral health clinic. My counselor, Deb, she was incredible. It changed my life.
Nice. That was that right after your deployment?
Mm-hmm, yeah. And then I got out of the Army altogether, and I was like, I didn't even realize what my resources were or where I could even continue to do this counseling.
Sure.
So that was a process. But you have to rely on people. We rely on people. You know, I relied on my fellow soldiers, you know, when I was deployed. Yeah. And you can't go through it alone. You can't. And a lot of people do go through it alone, and it's incredibly sad. You have to have your tribe, and you have to have your pact, and recognizing that you need others, or it's okay to ask for help, is pivotal. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, that's all right. We'll say you did. Yeah. Yeah. What would you say changed for you once you had kids? Now, I know that your oldest is 9.
Gonna be 9.
Gonna be 9.
Yeah.
So she was born 2 years after you came back, 1.5 years, roughly?
2013, yeah.
Okay, so 2 years or so.
Roughly, yeah.
So what changed for you, you know, once you had kids? I mean, now not only it's you and your wife, but now it's a third, you know, person in your life too, in your home.
Well, I'm going to parallel it with an experience that I had at on-site, where we used to do guided meditations every morning. Yeah. And, you know, I had driven all the way down to Tennessee. My back was hurting, and like a couple of days later, we'd be doing these guided meditations. I'm like, this is just ridiculous. Mm-hmm. Sure. I'm like, this ain't going to work, you know? I was very critical of it. I was like, I'm not even going to sit in the little position on the floor, you know, right. Fingers crossed or whatever.
The stereotypical, like feet together kind of.
I'm not, you know, yeah, like sitting, you can't say it now, it's politically incorrect, but sitting like Indian style on the floor, you know what I mean?
Cross-legged, maybe they say now. Yeah.
I was like, my lower back's
crisscross applesauce.
Exactly. Yeah, my lower back was like killing me. I'm like, oh my goodness, I can't even sit. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to do this meditation. I'm going to find it. I found a chair and I just sat there. Okay. And I was like, all right, I'll do it. And it was painting. Like, this is one of the big breakthrough moments for me. It was a guided meditation where I basically came in touch with myself as a child. Okay. And it's like the inner child, finding that inner child. Mm-hmm. So it was, you know, guided meditations. They're kind of guiding you through a certain scenario. And for me, it was my old house that I grew up in that I briefly talked about. Right. And walked in the backyard, you know, past this tree with the tire swing on it. And I found myself down in this smaller tree as a child. And I got to like talk to myself. It was like totally trippy, and it was totally, you know, it was totally unexpected. Yeah. And I just lost it, man. Wow. I just lost it. Yeah. And I hadn't cried like that in a long time. Yeah. And I just wanted to stay in that moment so long because it was so liberating. It was so liberating. And now then, to answer your question about what it's like having children and how it changes you, you look at the child, I look at my daughter, I see myself as a child. Sure. And it's an incredible reminder to be kind to yourself, you know, to kind of view yourself as something that's incredibly vulnerable and sensitive. And so having children, and almost seeing my younger self in them, it's incredibly powerful.
Wow.
So I have 3 children now. I just had my last about a year ago, and it changes the direction of your life. It's like the hardest thing, but it's like the best thing.
The hardest but best thing. Yeah.
It's like the most extreme of emotions. It's like sometimes it seems like this is the worst thing, but it's the greatest thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but oh man, it's so sweet. So sweet. Just getting these pictures of my little boy at work. I'm like, man, I can get through this day.
Nice.
I can get through this day. But yeah.
That's that visual image that you just kind of created there of kind of putting yourself back in that position when you're a child in a meaningful place, the house in which you grew up, back on that tire swing or near the tire swing in the backyard, probably where I assume you spent a lot of time growing up. Putting yourself in that place emotionally, mentally, as an adult is such it's such an experience, liberating, but for some may also be terrifying, sad, whatever. Thankfully, yours was a good experience, and that was one that you can look back on and you receive a lot of, I don't know, calm from that, I guess maybe is a way to put it.
Well, I've said perspective probably a million times, but you see yourself differently. You can love yourself. I mean, we think of the greatest commandment, right? Love your neighbor as yourself. Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of people will be like, well, you have to be selfless. You can't love yourself, but you have to love yourself first. It's like you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of other people.
Sure.
You know, you got to put your oxygen on first before you put your oxygen on for the person next to you. Mm-hmm. It's the same mindset. So seeing myself differently really changed the course of my whole life. Yeah. A lot of people hate themselves. Mm-hmm. A lot of people see themselves and they're like the biggest critic. Mm-hmm. But you have to treat yourself like, I listen to a lot of Jordan Peterson. You have to treat yourself like it's somebody you love. You know, like you have to take care of yourself, like you actually care about yourself. And that's essentially what I've been trying to do. Because, and like my dad always used to say, like, if you're good, everything else seems to fall in place. And what kind of father do I want to be? Yeah. What kind of husband do I want to be? You know, what kind of son do I want to be? So on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And that's just what I have to think about on a daily basis. So it's little things, it's little goals that I've been trying to accomplish. You know, that I've been trying to put in my body good things, not bad things. Trying to fill my spirit, and it's really helped, honestly. So
yeah, and that idea about kids changing everything for you as well it's so true. I mean, going back to that, what kind of father do I want to be? What kind of husband, son, employee, whatever, you know, those are questions that put into perspective. You know, this is not just me that these things affect, but it's a lot of other people too.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a incredible responsibility. One that as a parent, I know you wouldn't trade for anything, but an incredible and very big responsibility nonetheless. And so I can see how, I guess that motivation plays into everything, not just for yourself and for the kind of commitments you have, but, you know, the motivation to do your best for the legacy of other people, for the memory of other people, for all those things that you have had so many different experiences with throughout your life. It's, yeah. You mentioned, you alluded to faith a few times. I know that's a big part of your life. Mm-hmm. What does that look like for you now? What did it look like when you were in the military? What does that look like for you?
It's a it's I hate to be cliche here. It's a journey, and you like I think back to like where I was growing up. It almost seemed like naivety. It almost seemed like living off of the coattails of my parents' faith, you know. And I mean that's around when evangelicism was like blowing up, and living off the coattails of my parents' faith, going to church because my dad says we're going to church, and then feeling like you have a relationship with Christ and you're not sure if that's 100% genuine or not, and then getting to a point in your life where you're like, I don't even believe God exists anymore. And that's what I was talking about when my world was turned upside down.
Oh, okay. So not only, maybe we could say, you know, the on earth kind of stuff, but also maybe like the vertical kind of thing, the spiritual.
For sure. Oh yeah,
so forth.
Absolutely. Because that was my world. And then you lose that whole, for a period there, you lose that in the doubting, you lose that whole part of your life, the spirituality of your life. You're like, is it all just a joke? You know, you doubt, and doubting is normal. I've had to tell myself like, it's okay to doubt. Like, and that's why I love the Psalms so much, which have guided me through
book of the Bible, the Psalms.
Oh yeah. Reading through the Psalms, like God is near to the brokenhearted, you know. And I think of David, and one of my buddies in North Carolina, his name's Jamie. He told me he gave me an incredible point, which was like, maybe David struggled with post-traumatic stress. You think about him drenching the couch with his tears, you know, God holding all those tears. You think of him like the darkness that he was in, so almost sitting in that darkness. But the beauty of it is that even darkness is light to God, right? And thinking of Psalm 139 and all these incredible Psalms, Psalm 18, check them out. It's a journey. There's a lot of things I don't understand as a Christian, and for a while that troubled me. Yeah. And now I'm okay with it. Just like, I don't know.
Acceptance.
Yeah. I just don't know. People will be like, well, what about this in the Bible? What about this? I'm like, I don't really know. That's what faith is. Right. Faith is being sure of what we hope for, certain of what we do not see, kind of thing. And I'm okay with that. And, you know, I think of where I was growing up and where I went and where I am now. And the vision that I've sort of seen is that God he's in the pain. He's almost, it seems like nobody wants to suffer. Nobody wants to go through hardship. Nobody wants to deal with that, right? But that's the closest you can almost be to God, in a way. But I also take great comfort in the fact that, which is in the book of Matthew, where Christ is hanging on the cross, and it's like, why have you forsaken me? In some interpretations that talk about, why have you abandoned me, God? It's like Jesus was essentially abandoned by his Father. You know, it seems like in that finding or seeing that Jesus, who experienced everything possible that man experiences and fought it perfectly and is victorious over it, is incredibly powerful. Incredibly powerful. So my journey has been like, point A, point B, right? It's not linear, and it's just seems like this for a lot of it. And eventually you just kind of find your grounding. And God reveals himself in that way. It's been a process. It's been a difficult journey, but I think God never intended life to be easy. Never intended anything really to be easy, right? Called to suffering, right? And that I just keep going back to that. Keep going back to the Psalms. I keep going back to Jesus. And sometimes that's like all the other stuff. Sometimes I just can't handle. I can't even think about. But keep going back to those those points because I'm like, they got through it. Jesus did it. He did it perfectly. He had to deal with it. There was something I wanted to show you. I don't have it. I won't get into it. Maybe I'll send it later. But there was a quote that I'll send you later from Jordan Peterson while he was quoting somebody else, and it applies directly to that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, clearly, your faith brings a lot of strength into your life. Clearly, it brings a lot of. It seems like it just ties everything together. I mean, you talked about acceptance, loving yourself, maybe even forgiving yourself is part of that too.
I named the second greatest commandment, not the first. Second greatest commandment. The first is love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. Second is like it. I want to just clarify.
We got you. But it seems like that brings everything together for you. All the lessons that you learned throughout your life, but learned throughout these most difficult times. Faith seems to be, for lack of a better word, the glue that holds it all together and gives meaning to these lessons, maybe, gives meaning to the difficulties that you've experienced, and a bit of a precedent, too, because, like you said, it was never meant to be easy, and there's certainly been many documented times of people who've had it very difficult, and clearly that gives you a lot of strength. That really helps you, move through life, I guess. Yeah.
Well, we were talking on the phone, and kind of alluding to Job, and when we were on the phone, I'm trying to remember what our discussion was as far as that goes. I just totally blanked.
Yeah.
What were you just talking about? Let's go. I need to drink more of this
Strength.
coffee here.
We're talking about strength. Talking about faith keeping you going. People having difficult times, and that's nothing jogging your memory on that one.
I just needed to
There were
get a
two
little
sips
coffee
of coffee there.
A little coffee bolus here. Been drinking caffeine all day. I didn't sleep well last night, man. I was wandering around, laying on the floor with my golden retrievers in the pitch dark.
Sometimes
I like life.
Have to. Sometimes you just have to. Lay on the floor. Yeah.
It's incredible. Calms me down instantly.
I'm with you on that. We don't have a dog, but if we did, I imagine I'd be with the dog, laying there as well.
Man's best friend.
Yeah. Seth, is there anything else that you would want to add? Anything that we didn't cover or anything like that?
Well, there's just so much we didn't cover, and there's so much more to talk about. I'd been trying to kind of write out as much as I could. I'm like, I don't even know where to start sometimes,
Yeah.
And that's okay. It's okay. And there's just so much that we didn't talk about that I would like to talk about, but people would be sleeping at home. Poor viewers falling asleep.
I'm going to guarantee you they wouldn't.
We'd just be going on and on. You know what? It's like Forrest Gump, sort of. You know what I mean? That's what my life feels like. Like I had said, lower IQ guy.
I knew you were going to say that.
I just have to, man. Just kind of ends up in the army. Forrest Gump was a great soldier, though. But
and clearly a great businessman, too,
he was.
by the end.
Bubblegum shrimp.
Yeah.
That's what they called it. But, I'm going to continue to keep journaling and writing all this out. Has been helping me. You kind of just, brains tangled up in knots, and then just writing it out. And as I write it, eventually I would like to put in some form of book. Mm-hmm. I usually do better by putting my words on paper than I do let them come out of my mouth here. So, there's so much more we could talk about, but might have to save that for another podcast. You might have to have me back on, man.
Part 2.
I'm down for it.
Part 2. People are going to love it. And I mean that because this kind of conversation is one that, I talk to people all day long in sessions, and I don't specifically see people with PTSD or any kind of issues related to that. But I've never had a conversation like this with anybody, professionally or personally. And so it was eye-opening for me in a lot of ways. I knew that your experience during your deployment was difficult. I knew somewhat of what you had experienced, but the kind of imagery, the kind of detail that you talked about there, was this mental picture in my mind of things that I said this before, but I can't even fathom. I have no point of reference for any of this, really. And so it's eye-opening in a lot of ways just to hear it firsthand from someone who experienced it. Thankfully, you're here with us, but of course you lost a lot of people over there too. A lot of good people that did a lot of wonderful things, lived a wonderful life and had family. And so it's eye-opening for me. It was wonderful to sit here and just talk about this stuff. From me as an outsider, someone that doesn't have the same experience and will never have the same experience you did. I thought it was wonderful.
I ask myself constantly, would I want to do it all over again? I don't know.
Yeah.
I just don't have answers for that, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm not a Jacko Willink. I'm not a David Goggins. I'm not one of the Marcus Luttrell. These guys are incredible. I listen to their podcasts all the time. Could kind of consider myself just a normal guy.
Mm-hmm.
Would I want to do it all over again? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a hard question. The fact is God put me here on this planet, and I'm trying to live the best I can. And part of that goes out to living well, So it's a work in progress or in process. I'm progressing through it, and you have to put the work in daily, and so it's not an overnight thing. Seeing myself as a child, I'm like, everything the world throws at you, everything it throws at you, it's not your fault, And seeing myself as a child helped me see that even better, because it's like we're sin, and then seeing myself and my children, seeing them as they are, it's a daily struggle. It doesn't just end. You have to keep fighting every day. So, I'd love to, if anybody in the comments below or wherever is feeling lost or without a sense of purpose, there's so many resources available that I would love to give Jeff maybe to put in the description box below, or wherever, of things that you can help, things that can help you, because it's never too late, number one, and it can, and things will get better. It will get better.
Well, to that end, Seth, if there's someone, and I'm certain that there is someone watching who is at that point of, maybe they had a similar experience to you, maybe just military experience in general, maybe some kind of, other difficult experience that left them very traumatized, not really sure which way is up, like you talked about. If there was someone at that stage in their life, they're not necessarily getting help, or they haven't fully opened themselves up to that kind of help, what would be your advice to somebody like that? And I don't necessarily mean resources, although that's an important part of it, but what would you say to that person if you just happen to run into them out and about?
Well, it sounds like you're describing kind of where I was at one point, and I just it'll get better. It'll get better. But you got to work for it, and it's worth it. It's worth it. You're worth it. Your life is worth it. And, it'll get better. And people will be like, well, what if it doesn't? Yeah. Well, that's not an option. It's not an option. And I would love to send out some resources if I can to anybody, but I'm just telling you, like, it'll get better. Keep fighting. You're worth it. Your life matters. And there is hope. There's hope. So
I love that. It's not an option. Hitting home that point that the only way to move forward is to keep on going. The only way to move forward is with hope. The only way to move forward is utilizing the resources you have, whether it be family, professional resources, friends, whatever it might be. But
right.
it's the only option. I love that message of just genuine hope. I mean, that's the basis of it, is that there's more to this, and you're worth it. That's good. That's good. Anything else, Seth?
I'm good, man. You
Excellent.
let me know.
Excellent.
Next time we'll have a couple beers or something, and I'll start opening up, loosen up, and tell you some more stories.
So I guess that's what it takes.
A couple of IPAs.
A couple of beers, and
just start the filters gone. I'll tell you how it really was. No,
there we go. There we go. Well, Seth, thanks again for being here. I mean,
thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I couldn't think of a better way, a better first interview. When I thought of doing this, you were kind of the first person that came to mind, because I knew you had been working on this, like, since you were over there, since you got back. But I knew that telling that story was something that you had been focusing on, something you had really made a big part of who you are and how you recover, how you get better. And I knew that this would be maybe an important part of that, or maybe a meaningful part of that. So I'm really thankful to have had you on here, have this be the first one that I was able to do so far. Love to have you back, of course. Part 2, part 3, part 4, whatever. It'd be good. Yeah, but yeah, I appreciate you being on here. Thanks for all your openness, honesty in all of this. These are obviously very difficult, heavy topics that I can't even begin to understand. But for you to open up about it is incredible to me, and I really appreciate that. I know I speak for everyone watching and listening too, that this story is an important one, not just for the sake of helping other people, but because of all the great people that serve and have served and continue to sacrifice. It's something that is, I don't know that you guys are given enough credit for what you have done, what you've had to deal with, what you continue to deal with. So I appreciate you being able to tell this story and people being able to view it. So that's where we'll end things. I appreciate everybody watching and listening. Please put any comments below, and certainly any questions you may have about anything, or any further thoughts about the discussion are certainly welcome. And hopefully there'll be another interview coming up soon. Thanks a lot.